So we put in some serious flight time at the drone filming paradise that is the Scottish Highlands, and I'm sure it will come as no surprise to you when we say that the Mavic 2 Pro and Zoom are pretty great drones. Yeah, they're pretty good, so you can either stop watching now or we've got a little bit more to say on the subject, so maybe stay tuned for that. Hello, my name is Stewart CARROLL and welcome to Drone Film Guide, the channel where we learn to fly like filmmakers and home of the world famous Drone Cinematography Masterclass. 8 hours of drone filmmaking education, taking you from drone owner to drone pilot to drone filmmaker. Link in the description below with the discount code embedded. Anyway, back to the Mavic 2. I'll do a more in-depth picture analysis video of these two drones, but we've done a very thorough analysis of this, so I'll give you the conclusions here. This is the first drone that I would ever feel comfortable putting the ISO above 100. On this one you can get to 800, even on the tests we did at 1600 ISO, you can probably go there without completely ruining the image. That is just fantastic. So if we're talking about low light capability, if you have to, and you'd only do it if you have to at the end of the day, because ISO does increase the noise in the image. If you had to, you could put it up on this. On the Mavic Air, absolutely not. There's enough noise in that image without, going above 100. So fantastic flexibility. Not so much of an option on the Mavic 2 Zoom in all honesty, but it's probably still a step up from the Air, but it doesn't get anywhere close to this. A combination of the light gathering ability of the 1-inch sensor on the Pro plus the 10-bit color space does give you much more flexibility to color correct and color grade in post. We did the so-called underexposure tests. We took a whole sequence of images, underexposing them sequentially and then bringing those exposures back in post to 0 EV, so to speak, to see what impact that would have on the image quality. And you can just pull back the shadows. It's just, when you're not used to that, the luxury of being able to do that is fantastic. So you can really stretch out that dynamic range that this large sensor and the 10-bit functionality promises. As I say, we'll get into that in another video, but just know that the promises of better image quality are true on the Mavic 2 Pro. Worth mentioning that there's no free lunch when it comes to getting this picture quality on the Mavic Pro. So let me take you through this very quickly. You have 3 picture styles on the Mavic Pro. You have normal, you have D-Log M, and you have HLG, hybrid log gamma. Normal mode is the only option available in the H.264 codec. I wouldn't recommend you use normal mode because it introduces noise into the image, tons of digital sharpening and all that kind of stuff. So if you're buying the Pro, the only reason you're buying it is for the better picture quality, so you'd never consider using normal mode, which means you have to go to D-Log M. D-Log M is only available with the H.265 codec. Now, as I've discovered, the H.265 codec is extremely computer intensive. This is a 2015 MacBook Pro. It's pretty nice, it's a pretty good computer. It's fast. I know it's quite old now, but I have to say, we have never had issues simply playing back 4K footage. This computer can barely play back H.265 footage. Now I've upgraded it to the latest operating system. I've upgraded Final Cut because I had to do all of that to even just play back H.265, and it can barely play it back, never mind actually edit it. You might have different experience with your computer, which is fine, but I'm just telling you the experience that I'm having here. So in order to edit that footage, I have to create proxy files in Final Cut, which is where it creates a lower resolution version of the same file. And then when you export it, it pulls in the original file to give you the original high quality. It's fine, but it takes time and it's a hassle at the end of the day. So just so you know, there's the strings attached to using this H.265 D-Log M. What I found a little bit odd is that on the Mavic 2 Zoom, you get a D-Cine-like profile, which is great. It gives you this nice flat picture profile, which at face value, visually at least, is pretty similar in color to the D-Log. When you get in close, you see that there's loads of noise and the picture quality is not as good as the Mavic 2 Pro. But it would have been nice if they'd put the H.264 D-Cine-like on the Mavic 2 Pro, so you at least have an option of a easier to use codec. But as I say, the only H.264 picture style on the Mavic Pro is normal, which you shouldn't be using if you bought this drone. Otherwise, you should have just bought the Mavic 2 Zoom and saved yourself some money in the first place, or got a Mavic Air, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to sell you either of these drones. This is still a great drone if it meets your needs. So beware, it's kind of hard going, H.265. The other thing to note, now this first point is a good point, which is that there's no digital sharpening on the D-Log image. So it gives you this more kind of soft filmic look, which I personally think is better. If you want to, you can add a little bit of sharpening in post. When you see it side by side with the other drones, the footage looks digitally sharpened. So it's nice to see that we don't have to bother trying to strip that out. The other curiosity is that there's a lens distortion. So you can see close up against straight lines. I'll show you this example of the tests that we were doing. The window's distorted, curves off. It's like looking through a GoPro lens a little bit, not quite as extreme. Now, when you're filming stuff far away, it doesn't make any difference, but that could be a bit of an issue. So you could need to find a way of defishing that footage in post a little bit if you are shooting that kind of stuff with your drone. Anyway, details, but hopefully all of that is somewhat interesting and useful for you. I'll just interject to give our drone cinematography masterclass a little push. Alina and I created this 8-hour fast-paced drone education over winter, and we take you from drone owner to drone cinematographer. Our perspective always is one of, it's what you do with it that counts. Much as we're talking about these shiny 2 drones here, it's what you do with it that matters, and having an understanding of cinematography, knowing how to handle light, knowing how to compose shots, knowing how to tell a story with your cinematography. That's what it's all about, and that's what separates you from all the other people with drones, not the drone itself. So with that in mind, check out the link in the description below. There's a discount code embedded. I think you will find it interesting. When we talk about focal lengths, both of these drones give you creative opportunities that have not been given to us by any of the Mavics before or any of the Phantoms before. The Mavic 2 Zoom obviously has a zoom lens that gets you from 24 at the widest end to 48mm zoomed in a little bit. It really does make a difference. It lets you get a lot closer to the subject, which is cool if your subject is kind of far away or you want to get closer without disturbing your subject. It also gives you a kind of compressed look, which is great for when you're rotating around a subject and you get that background swinging more in the scene. It's that kind of parallax effect that is very, very cinematic. You can go up to 96mm digital zoom. You have to be in 1080p mode for that to happen, and that gets you in even closer with a digital zoom. That does erode the 4K image, that's why it can only happen in 1080p. And at the 96mm, I have to say the picture is pretty poor quality. It's not even a good 1080 picture, if I'm honest. It's not very good at all. I found that if you get maybe up to about 70 or 75mm, that's still a pretty usable, sharp 1080p image, which is pretty cool. And you can get some wild parallax going on. We had some great fun replicating a Bon Jovi music video scene with that. It really is awesome. Absolutely love that. The Mavic 2 Pro comes a pretty close second in terms of creative opportunity from a field of view perspective. Obviously you have the wide end of things here, 28mm full field of view, I think it's called, in the menu. You also have the high quality field of view, which is where it punches in, gives you a 4K crop of the sensor, and gives you the equivalent of about a 40mm lens on a full frame camera. That's your comparison. That's already pretty good. Now if we're comparing that then with the digital zoom, well, we could punch in on that in post. That's a 40mm 4K image. We could punch in on that a bit and get a pretty high quality image up to 70. We could even go 200% in theory up to 80mm and still get a full 1080p high definition picture and benefit from all that parallax and compression and all that kind of stuff. So not that we're doing a comparison video here between the Zoom and the Pro, but if you were kind of just getting the Zoom for the Zoom functionality, then the Mavic Pro does get you halfway there. I'm not going to lie, it does kind of eat into the reason for buying this drone in the first place. The variable aperture in the Mavic 2 Pro is a nice addition because it gives us another means of controlling the amount of light getting to the sensor. The Mavic 2 Zoom, the aperture is fixed at 2.8, whereas on the Pro we've got from 2.8 to 11. On the overcast day at the top of the hill, with all this mist, I put it on f11 and I was able to get a shutter of 1/50th of a second, which, as I'm sure you probably know, is the perfect shutter speed if you're filming at 25 frames per second, because it gives you the correct amount of motion blur and looks best for those of you with a discerning eye for those kind of things. So that's pretty cool. Variable aperture doesn't get rid of the need to get ND filters, however, if you are trying to adhere to the 180-degree rule for your shutter speed, because on the following day it was much brighter and we had to put the shutter up to 1/500th or something like that to get a correct exposure. So we will look to get ND filters for this. We have 2 videos on ND filters if you want to get into that in more detail, but it is a nice addition. Noise. I couldn't believe how quiet this thing was. Now I've seen some comparisons where people test it with a decibel meter and such like, and you know, on paper it's maybe not even that much quieter, but the tone is completely different. This flutters, you know, it's like the flapping of a butterfly's wings as opposed to the humming of 1,000 bees. Mavic Air, which I'll be making a few references to for the sake of comparison, is kind of screechy in comparison. It does. That's the best comparison. This sounds like buzzing bees. This sounds like, it's like a purring cat. It's a beautiful thing. And from our perspective, I think it's fantastic because you want to attract the least attention possible when you're flying, and a quiet drone is a part of that. Just for the avoidance of doubt, I realise that these are twice the price of this, so I'm not comparing the two, but it's just interesting to make a comparison in some instances. Cinematic control. The Mavic 2 is very easy to control in manual mode. We'll talk about some of the intelligent flight modes and such like in a little bit, but I like to fly almost always in manual mode. So I like to get my EXP settings dialed all the way down so that on the hop I can just pull out a nice curve or a rotation without having to dial in some active track settings or whatever the case may be. Really nice, pleasant flying experience. Gone are the days of the old Phantom 2 where you're trying to, you know, do a tiny yaw on the drone and it just goes like this. You can get everything dialed down and control it nicely. Stability. I had this at the top of a hill overlooking Glasgow, and I was at the edge of the hill and the wind was crashing into this hill, blasting up into my face. Proper kind of can hardly stand up type situation, and this thing was flying perfectly. I was getting warnings all over the place that the wind was far too high and, you know, land it immediately, but that's by the by. The fact is, it was perfectly stable. There was no jitter in the gimbal. Amazing, fantastic stability. Battery life. It claims to have 31 minutes battery life. I'm sure on their tests it did. In windy conditions, we got about 20 minutes. Maybe the next day when we had it in slightly less windy conditions, a bit more than 20 minutes, but I'd count on 20, anywhere between 20 and 25 minutes, which is great. It's fantastic. Certainly when you're used to the Mavic Air, which gives you about 15, it's a big step up. So if that's important to you, it's certainly an interesting thing to keep in mind. 8-kilometer video transmission. Now, I'm never going to fly this drone 8 kilometers away because that is completely illegal pretty much in any part of the world. But what I am interested in is good video transmission that is not interrupted by standing behind a wall or by sitting in the car or something like that. And the video transmission on this seems to be indestructible, absolutely fantastic. I like to fly sitting in the car. I'll take off next to the car and then jump in the car because the car acts as a sun hood essentially. It gives me shelter so I can see the back of my monitor better without all the glare on the screen. With the Mavic Air, much as it uses a completely different transmission system, this is Wi-Fi, whereas this has OcuSync 2.0. The Wi-Fi on this really is quite glitchy. It's not great in all honesty. I did have at one stage 500 meters away. I could still see it all the way down a golf course somewhere. And then other times I'm getting 70 meters and then losing the picture on my screen, even though the drone is right in front of me. So it's very unreliable. Stand behind a wall, etc., etc. The Wi-Fi system's not good on this. So the transmission on this, absolutely fantastic. For those of you that do want to fly 8 kilometers or 7 kilometers, happy days. Portability. It is bigger and heavier than a Mavic Air, but smaller than a Phantom. Okay, that's quite easy to say. I have to say, if this is not small enough for you, then you need to take a long hard look at yourself in the mirror. The only thing that I was a little bit, not disappointed about because I didn't expect it, but I kind of feel that DJI, if we're talking about portability, I think they could have given us a case for the Mavic 2. I mean, it is expensive. Let's just put that one out there. It is kind of expensive. This Mavic Air comes with this lovely case. Drone goes in there. You can shove the controller in the back there with all your filters. You're good to go. I know you can buy a Fly More bundle and all that kind of stuff and get your wee bag for it, but I don't want that. I just want a little hard case that I can put that in and just dump it in a bigger bag. Dunno, it would have been nice. I mean, the thing costs quite a lot of money, the cases don't, so just saying. 44 miles per hour maximum speed. Okay, without sounding pretentious, I don't care about the maximum speed unless it has a creative value. And actually the maximum speed does have a creative value if it's stable, because it allows us to fly fast without having to speed up footage in post, and you don't end up seeing people scoot across the screen going zzz, and all this kind of stuff. We tried this in sports mode up in Glencoe and it was incredible. Not only was it fast, but it was completely stable. So much so, I was even able to put in a little bit of left yaw and do a curve on this thing in sports mode. So I was able to go tearing across the valley, putting a curve into the sideways motion whilst in sports mode. That has tremendous value creatively. If you're chasing a car down the road or doing some kind of fairly complex action-based shoot, having stable, usable sports mode is really, really cool. So I was very, very impressed with that. Big tick. I'm not going to get into all of the intelligent flight modes because most of them aren't new, but I want to talk about the Active Track 2.0. It worked pretty great. I had a few tests with myself, we had a few tests with the car, and it was, it did pretty fantastically. And the shots with the car is silver and the road was grey, so I had a job to track it, and it did very, very well. I'm not going to lie, it doesn't do perfectly. I'm not entirely convinced about that whole kind of when the car goes behind a hill and it, the active track estimates where the subject is and all that kind of stuff. It kind of did it a little bit, but then it kind of lost the subject from time to time. So, the same limitations apply from what we could gather in those tests, but at the end of the day, it's still a fantastic tool. What I was pleased, it didn't do any of that kind of hunting stuff that you sometimes get with active track, where it kind of lurches towards the subject, and if that subject is a person, scares the living daylights out of them. So I was pleased that it didn't do any of that. The other thing that I thought was fantastic is that the active track works equally well whether or not you're on the full wide field of view or you're zoomed in. So in the case of the Mavic Zoom, obviously it has a zoom function. You can zoom in and use active track all you like. It keeps a hold of the subject and gives you a bit more of a parallax effect with the background swinging around a little bit faster. On the Mavic 2 Pro, you have your wide angle field of view. You also have the so-called high quality field of view, which is the cropped in using the center of the sensor. It still gives you a 4K image. You can use your active track perfectly well on that, so I was very pleased about that. I love the quick shot modes on both of these drones. You'd have thought that you might not have so much use for quick shot modes as a highbrow aerial cinematographer, but actually they're great. If you're out filming yourself, then you can walk along, you can set a quick shot and do the boomerang in particular, the helix and the circle. Fantastic quick shot modes. They're quick and easy to get into. Really love those. We can't talk about the zoom without talking about the dolly zoom vertical effect quick shot mode. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, I'm not going to lie, I think we're going to be a little bit sick of that mode pretty soon, but you see we did a pretty cool example at the top of a mountain, and it is pretty awesome for your Instagram and whatnot. We actually did a separate video. The video that launched this channel in December 2016 was a video on how to do the post-production dolly zoom effect. Check it out. Little known fact, we were the first to do that video. It was then featured on a blog, and then subsequently 100 million other inspired videos came out on YouTube. Just saying, we were the first, and now it's embedded in the DJI software. I've been doing quite a bit of research into the hybrid Log Gamma HDR option here, and I can tell you now that it's quite complicated, and I don't think hardly anyone is going to be using it anytime soon for filming. In a nutshell, the HDR stuff films in a different color space, Rec 2020, so in order to use any of that footage with your other work, you need to convert that footage into Rec 709 color space. Otherwise, you're just shooting everything in Rec 2020, so that means setting up the timeline in your Final Cut completely differently. It's really quite complicated, and I don't think we're quite there with HDR, in all honesty. For the pros out there, and this is a Mavic 2 Pro, if you're being asked to deliver Rec 2020 hybrid Log Gamma footage because it's going out on broadcast with BBC or whatever, then happy days, this will give you that functionality. But for the rest of us, let's take a sidestep just now and stick with D-Log M. Wrapping up in more comfortable territory, I like this controller. The sticks give me lovely feedback when I'm flying, and that is the one thing I did like very much about the Mavic Air. I like the controller a lot. I like the way the sticks feel. On the Phantom 4 kind of controller, they feel a little bit rattly and a little bit pingy. These feel good, which is great for the manual control that I like so much. I like the switch on the side here a lot. It allows you to flick into tripod mode, which is really cool. You've got sports mode, positioning mode, which is standard mode essentially, and tripod mode. It's nice to have that at a fingertip. And I'm going to wrap this up with a pro tip. See this little thing on the side here? If you want to connect an iPad, which I did unsuccessfully as we've established at the start of this video, but if you wanted to connect an iPad using a USB controller, or USB cable, and you plug in that into the iPad and you can't figure out why it doesn't work, you have to pull that out. This will not connect unless that's pulled out, which I think I spent quite a long time figuring out with the Mavic Air not that long ago. Anyway, nice controller. This video was more about facts than opinions, so hopefully you find these facts and a handful of opinions quite useful when considering these two drones. I can't really tell you which drone to buy because it's all down to your own personal needs, but do with that information as you wish. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our drone cinematography masterclass, link in the description below. Follow us on Instagram, we put little snippets of content there, it's quite fun, we've got a good following there. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and as always, stay in touch and we will see you next time on Drone Film Guide.